Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires, and there's a host of damned souls at Penapaz.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead. And what of the true god? He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio. I'm your host, Irene Block, and with me tonight is my co-host, Mark Johnson.
Hello.
Hello. Hiya, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Looking forward to the show tonight.
Yes, so am I. We've got a really great couple of guests, and it's in a really good subject. But, what's really important before we get to that, how's Gertie?
Gertie has just been shut away in the kitchen for the listeners. Gertie is my 12-week-old British bulldog who is tearing the house to pieces and beating up my Jack Russell. She's just been exiled to the kitchen because of the amount of noise she makes.
I have to laugh because, whenever we talk and you hear her snoring in the background and she's just a puppy.
Oh, yeah, but she sounds like an old man, doesn't she?
I know. Wait till she gets older.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, dear me.
But you wanted a bulldog.
Think about it.
The snoring, the burping, the farting, You might as well have had another...
She does that. She does that.
You might as well have just gotten another man in the house.
That. Loud ones, too.
I was saying you should just get another man in the house.
No, I'll put up with Gertie. I've got enough men in the family as it is. But she's noisier than all them put together, I'm sure of it.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I hear,
yeah,
like I said,
cute.
I hear her all the way over from England, all the way over to here.
Yeah, you do, don't you?
So
okay. So do you want to introduce the guest?
Sure, that would be fine. I want to introduce for our guests for this evening, we have Joanna Summerscales, and we'll soon be followed with Bill Brooks, who will be joining us lately. Now, Joanna and Bill are the authors of the book 44, A Lifelong Encounters Involving Alien Abduction, Men in Black, a Serial Killer, and Persecution by the Freemasons, based on an ex-soldier's true story. So, Joanna, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mark and Irene, thank you very much for having me on for this first part, and Bill and myself for the second. That's absolutely lovely. Thank you.
Right, yeah, we'll be bringing Bill...
It's lovely to have you, Joanne.
We'll be bringing Bill in a little bit later, but we'll get started with you, Joanne. And first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about your background, and how did you get involved with writing this book?
Yeah, I'll just do a real quick snapshot version. First of all, I ran for 5 years AMASH, the AMASH project, in where I interviewed experiences on camera and radio, one-to-one, their story, and also had that did that confidentially, and had also have a helpline for them. Now, the AMASH project closed in December for various reasons, which I won't go into, but it's now under the new banner of the ET Newsroom, whose scope will be a little bit broader, going into much more fieldwork and stuff. But when I started off, it was really meant to be a UK-based project to support experiences, because there was just very little in the UK. And suddenly I was getting calls from all over the world now, and from military people, which was interesting. And early on, I think in 2012, I started the project early 2011, I had a call from this ex-British soldier, Bill Brooks. And he had just had a series of heart attacks and strokes. And he said that he had been for the last 20 years, since he was 44, trying to get his story told, or at least heard, without being ridiculed, without being sidelined, without being just, kind of swept under the carpet. Because back in, he had, the title of the book includes the number 44. And that was because prior to 44 years old, Bill Brooks was one of those people He was from a very impoverished background, very much where people, black is black and white's white, and there's nothing in between. No ET, no paranormal, no UFOs, nothing like that. And anybody who did think that were, in his book, a complete fruitcake. So here is Bill, bless him, at the age of 44, having what we call a download, very much like a near-death experience, where he saw his whole life go before him. Now, in that information that came was all the life that he recalled, and then all the ET contact and abduction. And that was such a shock to a mind like Bill's that it sent him into a mental tailspin for about 2-3 years, easy. I mean, it was almost having a nervous breakdown, almost, really coming off the planet with, mental issues there. But anyway, so finally, all of these memories over the years, from the 20 years when this happened, which was 1994, he began to assimilate all those memories and the information therein, and it just blew him away. And he'd been trying to find someone to just talk to about his story, to not necessarily corroborate, but just to hear it and to comment on it. And he had one or two brushes with researchers who honestly wouldn't give him the time of day, because even back in 94, which isn't that long ago, people weren't really interested in abductees that much. They wanted to hear about, their kind of angel guides and stuff like that. So he was like a square peg in a round hole right from the outset. So when he contacted me, I'd already been doing a MASH for probably about 18 months. And he saw me talking, I think, on radio or TV, I can't remember now, but also mentioning the military aspect. And he said, oh, my goodness, maybe there's someone here that I can finally talk to. And because he'd had this series of heart attacks and strokes all within a week, he was in a weakened position, and he just didn't want to die with all of that information unspoken within him. So that's how he contacted me, or why he contacted me. And the story has been very long in the telling, because once I understood it for what it was, I was totally blown away by the enormity of what this one man had been through. I mean, he says, it's my story and I find it hard to believe myself. How is anybody else going to feel about it? So when I said, look, I think we should get this written, because it's a social document, for want of a better term. Now, we have put based on an ex-soldier's true story, because Bill spent most of his life actually as a professional singer-musician, but the first years of his life as an adult, from 18 in 1968 to 74, he was a soldier. And we put based on, as I said, because he has a son, and they've had some quite harrowing experiences at the hands of people who would have them perhaps off the planet, let's put it like that, charitably. And he got very concerned about the impact this may have, perhaps not so much for himself, but that for his son. So he said, if we can put based on, I'll just feel that if I'm challenged, I have a bit of wiggle room to just say, well, it's based on. But in fact, everything that we have written in this book is true. And what I can tell you about it will be a vignette, a snapshot. So, if I say, please, folks, just have a look at the book and read the detail of it, it's not because we're going to make millions from anybody buying the books. It's because there's so much to say. And as usual, on a radio show, you can only get so much in of any kind of quality. So that's how it all began. And my background also is a therapist, and also with some media training in there thrown in as well. And whilst I haven't worked a lot with experiences, there's been one or two on the therapeutic side. It's given me a fantastic basis for counseling and working with people who are in a traumatized state, because I'm sure, as you guys will know from your own research and work, that there are a lot of experiences who, yes, some have a great time and there's no trauma there. They've assimilated it and they have an understanding and a spiritual awakening, perhaps, and all of the rest of that. But there's plenty others who are seriously traumatized, have PTSD, TD, and, other issues, health issues, mental health issues, and all kinds of ongoing issues because of interaction with ET. And, that may all be in the mix for our higher, greater good, But in the meantime, who's looking after those folks? Who's listening to them? I know, and maybe you've heard too, that there are plenty of them who've lost family, business, wives, husbands, and other social structures because they've dared tell their story, and people have ridiculed them. And we all know that when we're not valued and when we are abused in that way, it has a terrible effect on our psychology and therefore down the line on our health. And that's not even going where the ET have had impact on us and what, the radiation exposure has had and the implant stuff has had and all that good stuff. So...
Well, I started reading Bill's story and getting a little feedback here. I started reading Bill's story, and I'm only about 10% of the way through the book, and I'm already fascinated by it. And having interviewed many other abductees or experiencers, or, I think the term changes by the week. I'm not sure what people call themselves these days. There are a lot of patterns involved. And with Bill's, I saw it right away that his memories coming back seem to go all the way back to his childhood and maybe even to being an infant. These experiences are part of his whole life, and yet that screen was put in place that he didn't remember any of it till he was middle age.
I know, honestly, it is the most extraordinary thing. And Bill, like quite a few experiences, we're just going to use that generic term. So excuse us for that if anybody takes exception to it. Bill is dyslexic. And rather than being able to tell his story in a linear way, like many people can, it was like a starburst. And it was very, very hard and hard work to pull that together to create a linear structure timeline to his life, because of course there was one, and there is one. It's just this. And also what I will say is that when Bill was first in the army, and I'm jumping ahead here, but I will go back, but I just want to flag it up for people if they've got questions later, that Bill, when he joined the army, was within the first week or so already part of a mass abduction, which involved military, and I believe UK and US, because the regiment that Bill joined was a nuclear regiment based out in Sennelager in Germany. This is 1968. And what he was told by a colleague on the base was that the area was shared by personnel who worked underground from Area 51. I mean, I when he told me that, I went, what? He said, well, I guess it's the nuclear rockets, they're there to maintain them, facilitate them, and every 3 years they have to test them. So they were under strict instructions also not to fraternize with the Americans. Very, very interesting that Area 51 features in Bill's story, and so does E.T. from the military perspective, and so does an MK Ultra-esque mind control element that also happened within about the first 2 weeks of him joining this regiment in Sennelager. But we'll get Bill to tell us a little bit more about that when we get to that point. If you'd like me to just give you a little bit of background about Bill's early life, that may just sort of set the scene for people. I know I said he came from an impoverished area, but he was from an area in the UK known as the Black Country, the West Midlands. Birmingham may be a city people know best. Stourbridge is also another quite well-known place. Also, it's quite interesting because I've been on a field trip with Bill to all of the major areas where he had major events, and one or two of them involve a location near Wordsley where Robert Plant lived at one time. We don't know if he lived there actually at the time of these events, but certainly that is kind of just an interesting little marker there. So Bill's experiences did indeed begin when he was a child, but immediately he had no recollection of them until he was 44. But they actually, the place where he lived was in a crowded place. His history is family history is interesting too, because his aunts married a prisoner of war who was a young Nazi. And it's very interesting because this guy comes up in a mention when his cousin, who he grew up with, some many years later as an adult, had joined the Freemasons and came to warn Bill that he was going to die, that's the cousin, was going to die, be killed, i.e. murdered, because he'd said too much and it involved UFOs. The Nazi uncle was mentioned, so whether he was eventually actually a handler, we just don't know. There's just too little information of that very early time, as Bill was born in 1950, and there was still rationing in the UK at that time. Rationing didn't finish in the UK till about 54. So they really were from a very poor family, and Bill didn't have any education either. He had a brother who was severely physically handicapped, and his mother would spend most of her time in hospital with him, and he had a younger sister. So Bill's job, with his dad out at work, was to look after the house, collect and take the little girl to school, and in between times, apart from any household chores he had to do and dealing with food, etc., his joy would be to go into the woods and fields. He was a real nature boy, still is, and he would have some of his experiences in these locations, which were remote to anybody at the time. But when I went and visited them, which was about 2 years ago now, they were now very different kind of places, over to grass. There was no crop. I'll mention the crop in a moment. And it was a dog walking area. So a very different kind of social environment now. But back in 1959, 1960, when he'd be going out there, it was absolutely desolate. Nobody went there, almost nobody but Bill. So it's very interesting he had so much time alone. And he's had two contact experiences. One was absolutely major. And the other major experience he had, which he only recalled when he was 44, but he then retained that information fully all the way through, whilst all the other abduction memories gradually came back. But this one memory of contact was with what we call the Nordics. We think it's the Nordics. We don't know what else to call them, so that's what we refer to them as. And this was an astonishing event that happened when he again had gone off to his field, and this time it wasn't a field of grass, it was a field of some kind of crop. We'll say it's corn. And it was up, and his father used to admonish him about lying down in the crop, because he said you could get run over by a combine harvester. Anyway, so Bill never took any notice. He has his own will, which I think is why he's still alive, frankly. And this one day, he'd made himself a little bed in the crop, lying down, looking up at the sky, really enjoying the weather and the scenery, making shapes out of the clouds and all the rest of that stuff. Well, all of a sudden, there was a really large white sphere. Now, Bill said he reckons it was about 8 foot across. Now, that's huge. And it wasn't very far from him. It wasn't very high in the air either. It was spinning. It was spinning, spinning, and spinning. And then suddenly, on the heels of that, was another one. And that too was spinning. And then they began spinning around one another, and then spinning around, and they whizzed off. Now, Bill was so astonished at this. I don't know if we've said how long that lasted, but anyway, Bill stood up to see where these had gone. And all of a sudden, he finds himself in a crop circle. So he's the only person I know who was completely conscious when a crop circle was being made, when they were in it. Of course, in 1960, he didn't know it was a crop circle, but it's clearly what it was. And now he will say, yes, it was a crop circle. But what really caught his eye was that further down another field was a vehicle. Now, he hadn't seen or heard anything come in and land in this area, but he saw that it was an unusual shape. Anyway, he was fascinated by that, but then what caught his eye was a party of 4 people, just ordinary looking people, except they were a little bit taller than perhaps most of us, and they were wearing an all-in-one tunic suit. They were all blonde, and it looked like a family party. So it looked like there were 2 older children and mum and dad. And when they approached him, they seemed to do so slightly cautiously and actually started asking him. They may have said something else prior to this, but we don't know, if he doesn't recall if they did. They actually asked him if he had seen any, now he can't remember the word used, whether it was reptilians or reptiles, but Because Bill knew the area like the back of his hand, he knew he hadn't seen anything unusual there, so he just said no. With that, they seemed relieved. They began talking to him. Now, he doesn't remember all of the conversation. He remembers little snippets of it. And one of the things that they said, and again, I can't remember exactly, we've got it in the book, but something along the lines of that they had escaped from, I think, their masters who would have made them slaves, which was really interesting. Now, we just thought because they'd not long mentioned the reptilians that maybe they were referring to the reptilians. We could be wrong. It's just speculation at this point. We don't know for a fact. But then they also said that the Earth was in trouble, and would he help, little Bill, help if he could? Well, of course, he was really excited. He said, yes. What did they want him to do? They told him that he'd know at the time. But as a caveat to that comment, they said that he would be hated in his lifetime. And that, through various sequence of events and happenings, has been the case. And it has, led Bill a merry dance indeed.
Joanna, let me ask you a quick question. I was reading that section where Bill had his experience in the field with these blonde-haired, tall beings. And again, a lot of people refer to them as the Nordics. I'm very curious regarding their comments to Bill about escaping their masters who would enslave them. There's a lot of history that talks about it going all the way back to the Sumerian civilization with the Anunnaki, and even in the apocryphal book of Enoch in the Bible, which talks about the Watchers. And a lot of those, both of those have parallels in that there were people who worked for, or maybe were enslaved for, by other people. The Anunnaki supposedly created the human race as a slave race and used them to mine gold that they needed for, their planet. You had the Watchers who were tasked with watching the Earth, but then they misbehaved and came down and took wives of the humans and made the Nephilim, and they were punished and considered like the fallen angels. They got in trouble for it. So I can't help but make that parallel that these people had come down and saying that they were a slave race or that their masters were after them. They were in trouble for some reason. I just made that instant connection. Have you really heard of anything like that before?
I've never heard it reported by any experiencer that any of these folks have ever said this before, ever commented like this before. I mean, and also I think it's interesting because they would have known they were talking to a child. And, for a child to take this in, it's an awful lot. Of course, he didn't really take it in. So then how could he? But, the impact was as an adult. And really, at age 44, he had already, I'm talking about Bill now, a tremendous amount of traumatic experiences. And so when he had the download, a lot of things fell into place and made sense about that. But what's very interesting about this contact as opposed to abduction was when I said to Bill when we were working on the book, because they also asked him if he'd like to go for a ride. And this wasn't a kidnapping. This was a little ride, have a go in the machine. And he, of course, he said yes, and they did. And I said, well, what did you think? He said, well, I'd just seen Flash Gordon at the cinema, and I believed it all. And I think that's just beautiful. A child would say that, wouldn't they? I mean, that's just great. So the ingenuousness, it's beautiful of that childlike innocence. And he, as he said, they were friendly. They did, apart from what they wore, it was a bit unusual, but, because they were just like ordinary people and they were very pleasant. There was nothing fearful about them. He wasn't concerned. And why would you be if there was no signal being given off that, you might be in danger? So I think that also is very interesting because I'm sure the young 10-year-old Bill did not take it on at all about the fact that he would be hated in later life. And I'm sure gave it, no other thought at all. And enjoyed the ride. And what's interesting is that when he went on this ride, they didn't take him too far before they, had to bring him back, having shown him a bit of the propulsion system. Again, Bill can go into that. But what was very interesting and got my attention was the fact that the parents or the adults initially left him with the youngsters who went about using these spheres, getting them to move with their mind, and then said to Bill to do the same thing, which he had a go at doing, and indeed did manage to do. He managed to move the sphere. But as he says, well, I think they did it just to kind of show me, make me think that I'd done it, but because I can't do it here. But of course, maybe the atmosphere was very different in the ship, which allowed that. But what was interesting about that, when he told me the whole story, was that when he was about 9, so only about a year before, he was on an errand for Mum to go to the local shop to get some more medicaments and medicines for his brother. And on that trip, he was approached by 2 Americans in the long coats and the hats. And they talked to him about being Rosicrucians. And they ended up at his house talking to his parents about whether he could go to this club. And Bill had always been a bit of a loner. So his parents thought it was a good idea. And what they did with the kids, they actually, the 2 guys who were Rosicrucians said to Bill that they would come for him at another time, that, maybe he was too young to be a Rosicrucian or something. But meanwhile, they sent him to this place, or took him to this place called the Royal Ancient Order of, Antediluvian Order of the Buffalo, which was run by the Mormons. And on inclement days, when it was really raining and horrible, instead of doing the baseball and stuff, which they couldn't, they would do mind games. They would get the kids to try, to do telepathy, to do various things with their minds. And, when he told me just only a year or so later, there's these kids in this spaceship, for goodness sake, getting him to do the same. And I thought, wow, somebody knows something about this guy. What is it? Has he been tagged from a very young age? He did, in fact, meet the Nordics once before when he was about 5. And he was at a little pond area in a local woods, just on his tummy, just looking at the newts, these little wonderful creatures. And he was just looking at them and then putting them back into the pond. And then he noticed this group of 4 again, just like the mum and dad and the 2 kids. And they obviously had some kind of a chat with him. He doesn't remember all of that, but basically they told him that he should tell the other children not to take the newts because they were dying out. And Bill says, well, I must have said something to the other kids because I told them the space people told me to tell them, and they didn't take them anymore. And I think that's absolutely amazing. It's a tiny little memory. But Bill's earliest memory in the download is being 3 years old, around about. He could have even been 2. But he's outside on a toy Jeep, and he's just by himself in the sort of area where he can be seen in the front of the house. And the next thing he recalls is a sensation of being, if you like, placed back on the ground, still in his Jeep. But this time he's not outside his home. He's maybe a few streets away. We don't know exactly where. But suddenly there's all panic, let loose at home because he's disappeared. Now, we don't know how long he was gone for. We don't know any of that detail. But his mother, before she died, told him that he was found without his clothes. Now, it was a very poor time, everybody was very, very, very poor. And so, he said, well, maybe somebody could have stolen them. And that is true. Maybe they could have. But, maybe he just forgot to put them back on him. But he remembers seeing cylindrical object, sort of a vague memory of that above him. So his experiences started quite early. And again, there's nothing really in his family that would indicate something like that going on. Certainly not from mum and dad's point of view or grandparents, as far as we're aware.
Well, let me ask a question
groups.
On the family aspect of it. Did his father or maybe a grandfather or uncle, anybody serve in the military as well?
His father did, but it wasn't in any, high up way. There wasn't anything that we've been around this story quite a long time now. And there's, we've been uphill, down dale with trying to tease out any possible, understanding of information that may be slightly under, the skin of things in regard to his parents, but there's just nothing that comes. So we don't see that there is anything.
Okay.
I'm not saying there isn't. It's just that we haven't been able to find it.
It's just that we've come across people before that have family that are abductees or experiences that have had family backgrounds in the forces.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely, absolutely. No, you're quite right. But in this case, and I have too, I've spoken to plenty of other people, and that's the case. But in Bill's case, we can't see the link. We can't find one yet. Nothing, and there aren't any other family members left to ask now. So we just, at the moment, we don't think there is.
Well, let me ask another question to follow up into that. I'm sorry, Skype's giving us a little bit of a delay here. In regards, we asked the military connection because there seems to be that with a lot of abductees. Whitley Strieber and Stan Romanek and such had family in the military. In fact, Whitley Strieber talked about, an uncle, I believe, that seemed to have a direct connection with all of this. But here's another question. Has Bill undergone any type of hypnotic regression to try to bring out more of these memories?
No, he hasn't. He's not really that much in favor of it. Though, having said that, so many years ago, he recalls that he thought, well, he would have a go because there was an American lady in town who was expert at that, and he would subject himself to it. But which must be Barbara Lamb, because she was over. She comes out or did come over to the UK quite regularly. But at the time when she was just beginning to do the work. I guess an electric lawnmower started up next door and put a spanner in the works in terms of the ambient, noisy facility to do it, whatever. And I think she even told Bill that she wasn't able to work with him, something along those lines. Bill can confirm that. But so he hasn't gone down that road. But what's amazing is that since the download in 1994, at the age of 44, he had this one massive memory we call it the Abingdon incident, which remained full and open and complete. It's probably, I'd say, as a memory, about 85-90% complete. The other memories, apart from the contact, that was a full memory that came back. The other contact and abduction memories came back very slowly over the next 20 years. And what happened was that this tsunami of information, tumbled out into this poor man's brain and mind. And it's like pushing, like if you imagine an ice cream cone and then a small funnel being the actual physical brain. And here was this massive information, funneling through and absolutely messing with his sense of reality, as you might imagine, from someone who, black was black and white was white. And, Bill will say this of himself. And so the Abingdon incident, though, is extraordinary in that, being the most complete memory, it is also the memory he retained instantly. And what's very interesting also is that at the moment of the download, he had a sudden gnosis, a total knowing, like on a cellular level, that the governments knew all about it. And also he began researching pharmaceutical industrial applications for, how they deal with humanity, because he knew that was a big part of the subduing of humanity. It's very, very interesting how it hit his mind and how he began, becoming himself, because really and truly, for 44 years, this poor man was piggybacked like a guinea pig, and his body and mind and whole system were not his own. It was being absolutely, used by other elements. How many other elements, we don't know. We know he's had association with the Nordics, whatever, or the Pleiadians, if you want to call them that. The reptilians, that was a huge event. He's had one or two with those. Shadow beings, the Greys, and he's seen craft just to a ridiculous degree. So there has been so much that he's been through in his relatively short life, and even at 44. At the time of the download, I mean, people were saying things to him and things were happening to him, but because he had no frame of reference for it. He totally, for example, a very good example of this is that at the Abingdon incident, if I perhaps maybe this is a good time actually to give you a quick overview of the Abingdon incident before we, bring Bill in or
Sure,
go for a break.
Sure. Yes.
The Abingdon incident focuses around, I think this happened about 84. So when Bill was about 34. Bearing in mind he was born in 1950, if I got my maths right. So after the army, he did various, apart from trying to develop his professional musicianship, which he eventually did very, very well, very successfully, in between times he was doing driving jobs. And this one job was a 2-day job, and it was basically to take gas cookers or ovens. They were Cannon Gas. That was the company based in Bilston, near Birmingham, not a million miles from Birmingham. And his job was to go Monday morning, collect them early. The van was already loaded up, and he had 2 drops. He was going to go to Southampton, which was probably about 4 to possibly 5 hours away drive, do the delivery, and then he'd be overnight either at a B&B or a little hotel, or he'd sleep in the cab. Most drivers did that and just claim their overnight. And then the next one was Evesham. Evesham is a town which is not very far from Oxford, Abingdon as well. So the story starts that he goes for the van, he's driving along, he delivers to Southampton, and by the time he's finished, it's actually quite late. So he wants to drive now. Evesham, Abingdon, is nearer to the Birmingham Midlands area where he is based, where the company's based. So he decides rather than do it in the morning, he'll start driving back that direction then. So he gets to Abingdon, I don't know, about 11 o'clock. At that point, he has got himself some supper, maybe fish and chips and a coffee. He likes to smoke roll-ups, so he has a cigarette sometimes. So he parked on a lay-by, but the backdraft of passing vehicles was just too much and caused too much noise. So he eventually went and found a little side road or dirt track, and he switched his lights off, so he didn't disturb anybody because it was quite late by this time, about 11, as I said. And he noticed as he was driving up, he said, "What looked like a Christmas tree?" It just presented like that. And then as he got a bit closer, it began to take on more the form of a shape of a Catherine wheel, like a firework. Well, he didn't think too much of it. And there were all these lights, which he just thought were the lights of Abingdon City. So he's by a big field. And I think this is over to his left. Bill will correct me or add to this afterwards. And anyway, so he's just sort of glancing out. He doesn't see anything. He doesn't see any dwellings or anything like that. It's really pretty much pitch black, and he's out sort of countryside way, and there's no sounds really. So he notices that in the field, the rabbits are scurrying here and scurrying there. And then he notices that the cows are all in a herd at the bottom of the field. And then as he's sort of attending to eat his supper, he looks up and suddenly the cows are in the middle of the field, like, within seconds. I thought, well, that's a bit strange. And then he notices a light above them, and it's in the shape of a triangle. And there seems to be a beam coming down. And I'm just going to sort of whiz through this story, and then because Bill can add any detail later. And there's one beam over just one cow, and the cow appears to be going up into the beam. And around it are what Bill assumes to be farmers wearing overalls or coveralls. And they're waving their arms, doing something. And he just thinks, Bill said, "I'm not a farmer. I don't know what farmers do with their cattle of a night, or at any time for that matter." He said, "I've no idea, so it didn't occur to me that this was anything strange." I said, "So how did you think the cow was getting up in the air?" He said, "Well, I thought it might be a forklift. I don't know. How would I know?" I just think it's gorgeous. Bill is
that's sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's true. What you have no knowledge of an area. Why would you know? But it's just made me laugh because I've asked all those questions. How could you possibly think that? But anyway, he did, and he was anyway intent. He was getting on with his supper, having his coffee, and he was about to put his head down for the night when on the radio, just playing very, very low, was the song "Memories," which is very interesting, very apposite. And anyway, he decides to at that time to light a cigarette. And the moment that he strikes the match, everything instantly goes black. There's no lights whatsoever. And he thinks, oh, good, the farmer's gone to bed. I can have a good sleep now and I won't be disturbed. And then all of a sudden the radio goes nuts. It goes, sort of squelch, as he calls it. He used to be a radio operator, and so we'd call it white noise. So he then slides under the dash. At this time, he's over in the passenger side because it's a lot more leg room. He's got his feet up. So he hunches himself down under, the radio, which is under the dash, to get a look to see what wirings come loose or something to cause this noise increase. And he said it was so loud, it, nearly had him out of his skin. Anyway, with that, the whole cab lights up, and indeed the entire area lights up with a bright light that is so white and bright you can hardly look at it. Well, with that, he thinks, what the heck is that? So he brings himself up, and as he comes up, he's facing his rearview mirror. And in the rearview mirror, he sees some what can only be termed alien faces. Now, he's got a plate glass window at the back of his cab. And he thinks, oh, God, I've left the back doors of the cab open and somebody's got in, because he thought it was reflecting the back of the van. But no, what was happening was the plate glass was reflecting the front window, which he hadn't quite seen yet.
Oh, my God.
So as he sort of swivels round to full front position through the windshield, he's suddenly met by a shocking sight of 3 grey heads, which seem enormous to him, against the windshield. And he's in utter shock. Meanwhile, the exterior is going orange, and there's a massive structure to, I think it's the left, which almost looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it's like kaleidoscopic in its glass-like structure, and it seems to be reflecting everything. Now, what that is, we don't know, but suddenly there seems to be these it's almost like a transporter situation going on, and it looks like these greys are appearing, as if they're manifesting from a beam me up Scotty kind of scenario. But these 3 are on the windshield, and the next thing Bill knows is that they are within millimeters of his face. And then the next thing is he is going out through the windshield. But the weird thing is, which he noticed instantly, was that when their faces came to his, the window became plastic, like cling film, whilst the rest of the glass remained solid. So he now is being transported upward with them, and he's taken on board this craft, and he is immovable. He can't, he thinks he's floating. He's not quite sure. He's not aware of moving his feet or his legs. And he's being moved into the craft, being maneuvered into this area. And as he is coming round, he sees, I think it's to the right, but he'll tell me if I've got that wrong. I'll lose the detail now. But he sees these rows of what look like cells, perhaps cages even. And he would definitely say there was something alive in them. What that living thing was, he couldn't tell, because it was in his sort of peripheral vision. So the next thing is he is then lying on a structure, a bed, whatever, examining couch or whatever you want to call it. And he can't move, but he can move his eyes. And he sees an archway through which there's a large slab on which he sees the cow. Now, he assumes it's the same cow that went up in the beam of light. Again, this is another first. I've never heard of anybody who's ever witnessed a cow being abducted, because plenty of times we hear that it's just and only military. Well, whether these guys are working with the military at that time, I don't know, but these were definitely the Greys. And then he sees them making some gestures with their hands in the direction of the cow, and out the cow goes. And he knows it's dead, and he panics and thinks, oh my God, I'm next. He thinks he's about to die.
This is frightening.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that moment, that not only are you in an alien environment, to say the very least, but you're with beings you've never seen before, can't compute, and then you've seen, something die that you just saw was alive, and then here you are in a state, on another slab. Well, this one grey comes over to him and puts his hand in the direction of his chest. Whether he touched him or not, he can't recall. But that's how he remembers the detail of the Grey's hand, which he can tell you about. And he says, no, you're human. Now, I know
I'm glad they
humans
made
have
that
died.
distinction and didn't turn him into hamburger. Yeah,
I tell
he
you,
comes.
this is just such
I
an
could see
amazing
I'm sorry.
story.
I could just see the aliens coming up and touching him and going, "Hey, Bob, you know what? Medium or well?"
It's like the cow at the end of the universe, isn't it? The restaurant at the end of the
Yes.
universe.
Oh, love Douglas Adams. Don't get me started. I'll be quoting him all day.
I love that. Anyway, so with that, there's one or two come around him and he feels something hot going up his right nostril, something the same in his, I think, right ear. And then before he blacks out for a little bit, he sees something like a drill heading toward his eye.
Okay.
When he comes to, I know.
Well, this has done me now. Oh, I'm scared.
Oh my God. Well, when he comes to, he's in another room, or maybe it's the same room and it's just reconfigured. We don't know, but he's in a room anyway, and there's nothing else there but a video screen. Now, you got to remember the time frame in the context of this. There were no video screens or anything like that at least everyday Joe Public was seeing. So there's this video screen that's showing him wars. I don't know how many different wars or whatever, but also birth, the birth of a human being. So he's shown that, and there are obvious pockets of no memory, but basically the next thing that he recalls is that he's sitting on a bench aside a very big round porthole, like a window, and there's a very attractive looking Asian lady with also negroid features, very interesting combination with blonde hair. And this window, he can see, it looks like he's looking through his night vision in the army because everything is deep green. Now, he thought, gosh, bearing in mind that they were, up one moment, they were clearly going up somewhere, and suddenly now he feels that they're in some watery environment. So he said to the woman, are we at the bottom of a river? She said, no, the sea. And what he noticed was that there was no glass or anything stopping the sea coming in, but obviously some kind of field, because just when you overfill a cup, it has that slight round tension to it before it actually overspills. It had that look to it. So it wasn't breaching the room, of course, but had that look. And he just noticed that it really had the look of the night vision, and which is really interesting, because he knew what that looked like. He'd seen that many times. And he also knew that if you were at the bottom of the sea, it would be pitch black and you wouldn't be able to see anything. And he just thought that was very interesting. Now, she obviously asked him a few questions. And he said, I don't remember the questions, but I remember my answers. And one of the answers was, well, I can't because I have a wife, a family, and they'd wonder where I was or what happened to me. Again, he can tell you the specifics. And answers along those lines. And with that, he's obviously exiting the craft. And she's there. And as he's coming down, he said it's just like a normal exiting, I don't know if it's steps or a ramp. But anyway, and he's thinking, oh my God. One of the things that he and his mum always used to argue about was that she believed in UFOs and ETs and he never did. Sadly, his mother died before he had the download and could discuss anything with her. But at that moment in time, and she also thought the Betty and Barney Hill case was amazing. And in fact, even thought, wouldn't it be great to be abducted? She would just love that experience. So Bill was coming down this, whatever it was, exit place, thinking, God, wait till I tell my mum about this. And then all of a sudden he thinks, tell her what? And then he thinks, oh, wait till I tell my wife about this. Wow. And then all of a sudden, tell her what? So the next thing is, he's outside his van and it's early morning. Now and he has no memory of what's just occurred. So it's been hours. And then he thinks, well, logically, the only reason I'm outside the van is if I want to have a pee. So he suddenly sees a house in the near distance. And so he goes to the back of the van, out of any possible view, to have a pee, which he didn't actually need. And there, to his absolute shock and horror, was the cow.
Oh.
Now, how clever are they? Were they testing his memory block? Because he had no idea what that cow was doing there. It had been excised like they do. It had had part of its jaw taken.
Mutilated.
Yes, all that. He just panicked. He thought, oh my God, they're going to think I killed this cow. They're going to think I had something to do with the demise of this cow. And off he went. I mean, he had then some most extraordinary experiences, which I'm going to let him tell you in the continuation of this story, because, well, I'll tell you this one bit, and then the bit of the detail in between I'll let Bill tell, because this is mind-boggling. So he gets back to his work, and they say, well, excuse me, you haven't delivered the Evesham lot yet. Well, Bill did. He did the delivery and came back. And they said, well, you can't have, because today's Monday, and, you can't do that much driving in one day. He said, no, I've been out overnight. Yesterday was Monday. Today's Tuesday. They said, oh, no, it's not. Now, one other detail I'll just say is that on the way driving out of the way of the environs of this cow, Bill saw a van exactly the same as his, or at least that's what it looked like, and somebody driving it who looked, guess what, very like him. Now, his foreman, I know, and then his foreman or manager goes to make a call to the Evesham office, or whichever one it was he last delivered to. We think it's the Evesham one. And he comes back in and he says, you've got your brother working for you, haven't you? He goes, no, he's disabled. And he goes, well, there's someone answering your description, finishing off delivering the cookers. And in the end, nobody could make head nor tail of it. And they joked, just calling him Superman. But he was absolutely flummoxed. And he ended up...
I tell you as well, I am gobsmacked. I'm sitting here with my mouth wide open. But we've got to go to break.
That's a perfect time to go, because there's loads more to this part. Just this story, there's loads more, and which Bill can enlighten you with. But it is, oh my goodness, even telling it, gosh, it's incredible.
Yeah, it certainly is. Anyway, we're off to break, and we'll be back with Joanna Summerscales and Bill Brooks.
I'm Sonia Brose, Catholic charismatic and spiritual warrior who has spent years fighting negative forces. My new book, The Curse of El Diablo, has just been published by Glennet Tye. The Curse of El Diablo is the true story of my journey to northern Mexico to help a family tormented by an evil sorcerer skilled in the arts of brujeria. But I soon found myself in a dangerous struggle as I battled the evil forces thrown at me by this brujo, and it was only my faith in God that protected me from the onslaught. The Curse of El Diablo is an epic story of a struggle between the forces of good and evil and the triumph of faith over darkness. The Curse of El Diablo is now available in softcover and ebook format on Amazon.com and on GlennetTye.com.
Have you ever wanted to visit the south of Italy? Amalfi, Ravello, Positano, Sorrento, places of immense beauty on the Amalfitana coast. Nearby Vesuvius stands proud against the sky, shadowing the ancient Roman ruins of Pompeii. In the midst of all this beauty lies the picturesque hillside village of Pontoni that dates back to the Middle Ages. Stay in Pontoni, in the self-catering apartments of Il Petrale, the beautiful casa belonging to Carmiana Rispoli, who will warmly welcome you when you arrive. Il Petrale, a haven of peace in the heart of this magnificent place called Pontoni. For more information, email us at carminerispoli@email.it. That's Carmine Rispoli, CarmineRispoli, @email.it.
Good evening, Agent 47. It has come to our attention, through the highest intelligence sources, that Irene Allen Block has published her novel, The Psychic Spy. Our sources tell us that The Psychic Spy is a riveting thriller about Eileen Evans, a beautiful young psychic who is recruited by British intelligence during the Cold War to participate in their top-secret remote viewing spy program. Eileen soon finds herself plunged deeper into the darkest heart of the intelligence community as she is ultimately trained as a spy and a psychic assassin. Nick Redfern says The Psychic Spy is filled with adventure, intrigue, and shadowy characters, and as Irene Allen Block shows, the mind is a mysterious and dangerous tool. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to immediately purchase a copy of The Psychic Spy by Irene Allen Block, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and GlenAtai.com. This tape will self-destruct in 1 second.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. TalkStream Live, now available in the iTunes App Store.
Welcome back to Paranormal UK Radio. I'm your host, Irene Allen Block, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Johnson, today. And we're talking with Joanna Summerscales and Bill Brooks. And hello, Bill.
Hello.
Hello.
Bill, welcome to the program.
We've been waiting for you to come on, Bill.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, very much so. Mm-hmm. Just to recap that we're talking about your book, 44, based on an ex-soldier's true story of lifelong encounters involving alien abduction, men in black, serial killer, and persecution by the Freemasons. And there's obviously a lot to discuss, but Bill, one of the things that Joanna has been giving us a rundown on your background and experiences. Would you mind talking about what happened when you first joined the military? Because it sounded like you had experiences pretty much in your first week there after you joined the military.
Yeah, I did, yes. It wasn't actually as I joined the military, it was as I joined my regiment. Excuse my throat, I've got a little bit of a sore throat. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Yeah. I did my 3 months basic training in London, a place called Woolwich. I had 2 weeks leave from that, and then I was sent to my regiment in Germany. When I arrived at the regiment, most of the regiment were away on training exercise for 6 weeks. It's called practice camp, and it's a live firing exercise. You end it with a live firing. It's a 6 week exercise, and I joined the regiment while they were all away. But you always leave a rear party at the regiment, and I joined the rear party of the regiment. And I met a guy who actually I found out later wasn't even in the army at that time. He was 10 years, he joined 10 years later. He was in 10 years earlier. And his brother. I got hold of his brother in London. Blackpool. Joanne, can you help me out? I'm losing it.
Yeah, we're just talking about your first week there, and you'd met John. And why don't you start telling the story about you guys being sent on kind of watch when you down at the Senalaga Ranges?
Sorry about this. I do lose it through the strokes. I've had strokes. While I'd been there a few days. I'd only been there a week, less than a week anyway. We were about 15 of us. Were put on an exercise, and we just went out into what they call the bush. In anybody knows that area will know what the bush is. And John and I, the guy I was with at the time, We were put at the end of a track of a field, of 2 fields, 3 fields in fact. There was 3 fields. We didn't know that at the time because we were left at the end of the track on guard duty, which is normal, nothing to guard really. And it started to, not dark, but it just started to get dark. And I saw coming towards us like an orange mist. And I said to John, what is it? And he said it might be a gas attack. Not a real gas attack, but, you know, training gas attack. So we went back to the section who were camped in 2 different fields in vehicles. And when we got there, everyone was asleep. So I went and found an NCO to wake. Well, we went and found an NCO to wake up to tell him about this orange mist and if we were being attacked. And he said that we'd been stood down, which means exercise is over, you can go to sleep, nothing happening. So John and I went and found what we call a Saracen with Hessian and camouflage on the top, which is softish. There was nowhere else to sleep. So we went on top and we lit a cigarette and we were just sitting there as it was getting dark. In the next field to us, which was right by us, I saw coming down what looked like flares with parachutes fitted to the flares. But then it turned into a very bright light. And I could see the guys had got out the vehicles in like a trance state in this bright light. It was a very bright light. And they were walking towards the bright light. Well, I looked at John and I went to get down off the vehicle. I was trying to get down off the vehicle and I had to get down backwards with my back to a wood that was behind me. And as I was coming down the vehicle, John was saying, don't go. And he was looking forward at the woods. And he said, don't go. And I was already down on the, I got 1 foot on the deck by then, and I was turning round, and as I turned round, I saw this guy in like a dark black uniform with a blue, shiny little blue badge on the just a minute, which sleeve was it? Right hand sleeve, the one he had the gun in. He had a gun pointing. Well, it wasn't actually pointing at me at that time, it was pointing downwards towards me. And he said, walk towards the light. And John, I could still hear John saying, don't go. And as I turned, I sort of turned, looked at John, turned, looked at this guy, and he'd come closer to me, and he got the gun, and he pointed it towards my head, cocked it like he would a 9mm. It looked like a 9mm, but it looked bigger than a 9mm. On the other hand, the shock could have made it look bigger. It looked big anyway. And he cocked it, and I started walking towards the light, as you can imagine. That's the last thing I remember, is walking towards the light with these other guys in a trance. The next thing I remember, I'm in the next field to it. I know it was the next field to it. And there's 3 officers who were very high up, quite high officers. To me, this didn't seem abnormal because I didn't, it was the first week in the army, really. I'd only done my training, and it was the first week in, and John was next to me, and he was saying, do you remember what happened? Do you remember? And at the same time, I got these officers in front of me saying, whatever you've seen, whatever happened, you will never talk about, even amongst each other, or to anyone else ever. And they forced us to sign at well, I wouldn't say at gunpoint, but there was 3 guys behind us, these guys that in the black uniforms from the night before, whether the same ones or different, they were behind us with the guns. So to me, I thought I'd better do what I was told, which anyway I would have done it because I was a new soldier, not knowing that this was not normal.
So they made you sign the Official Secrets Act?
Another one. I'd already signed 2.
Oh.
This was an American one.
Yeah.
I'd already signed the 2 British ones.
Yeah.
And I must have actually signed the American one to join the regiment that I joined. I must have signed that as well.
Yeah.
I'd signed a couple. So I take it for granted I'd already signed the American sufficient, but they gave me another one.
Yeah.
To sign, which I didn't read it. I just signed it.
Mm-hmm. And this was to make sure that you didn't reveal anything that you'd seen.
Yeah. Within a week, John and I were walking back to camp, and by a pub called the First, we used to call the First, there were some railway tracks, disused, completely disused. I didn't know that at the time. It's the first time I'd walked past these tracks. It was the first time I'd ever been that way. I'd only been with them a week, the regiment. And as we were walking back, I saw flashing lights. Well, I was drunk anyway. And I saw what I thought was a bald-headed man on a bike next to me. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? A 4-foot bald-headed man on a bike. That was my mind. You can imagine what that was. It was a grey. Anyway, I walked across the railway crossings and John was the other side, and he said to me, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead.
Sorry, I knocked my microphone. He said to me, do you remember what just happened? And I said, nothing just happened. He said, don't you remember what just happened? And I said, no. He said, we were took again. I said, took who again? Because I was drunk, and to me, John was talking crazy, absolutely, utterly crazy. I just thought he'd gone mad. Now I remember, at 44, I remember all this, and I realised what he was talking about, but I didn't at that time. And we walked back to camp, really. That was all we did, really. I saw this, what I thought was a bald-headed little man on a bike go past me. That was my mind at the time, that was making things up. Because you make things up in your mind because you can't understand what's in front of your eyes. So your mind's trying to make things up. And
so Bill, these men that were dressed in black, these were what you put as in the title of the book, The Men in Black.
This was a week later after this. Yeah. A few weeks later. It could have been a few weeks later. I'm not sure of time at all in this. Yeah. I'm not sure of exact times, as you can imagine. A few weeks later, I used to go to a pub, and I used to walk out to the back of the camp, walk up an archway, turn left, and go to a pub just down there when I first joined. I wasn't going into the Senalaga Strip, as we called it, Senny Strip, with the other lads. And I met a lad in there, and there were some nice girls he was with, and so I stayed there, you know. But as I was on the way to this pub, I used to meet these, they used to be at the end of this track, and I met them, and I got into the car with them. Don't ask me why. And they took me to bookshops, American bookshops in Germany. Well, I think I was still in Germany, I imagine. And they offered me the book. They gave me the book, Catcher in the Rye. Now, I'm not a reader. I know nothing about books really at all. I'm not a book reader at all. But they also gave me another book called My Mother Taught Me, which was a pornographic book, a greenback they used to call them. And these were produced at the time I'm talking about now, and I didn't know this until Joanne looked into it. It gave me quite a shock, actually, that it actually existed, because I thought it was in my imagination. And that's what they were doing. They're taking me to bookshops and things like that, and that was I used to have to try and avoid them. And I also met him when I was a child as well. I was going to a friend's house who was a farmer. As I said, I know nothing about farmers. It's only because he was a friend for a week, about fortnight. I went up to his farm. I never did anything up there. And that was the last time I saw the Men in Black. And that was the first time I saw the Men in Black. And they were used to wait for me on the way. And I actually stopped going because of them. They frightened me.
And this was when you were about 13, wasn't it, Bill?
Yeah, I was about 13 then. Yeah, 13 to 14, between 13 and 14 at that time.
And I think what's interesting is that Bill didn't get into the army. He actually failed the test, the written test, the maths test, and they said, oh, don't worry, you'll soon pick it up. Now, some people may say, well, that's not that unusual in 1968. But Bill was also dyslexic. He really learned to read and write in the army properly. I mean, he can do that now, but, you know, back then it was different.
Yeah. Well. So it sounds like they were trying to make the conditions right to get him in no matter what. They wanted him in.
Yeah. Exactly. And also, just to Bill, if you don't mind, just very quickly, I don't want to take your time, but just to say about these men in black, they were dressed like Chicago gangsters. You see, they were never allowed to associate with the Americans, but these were Americans in a big black car. There'd be maybe two of them and maybe a driver, and they'd say something to Bill, which got him in the car. And I said, well, why would you go in? He said, I don't know. But this happened on 3 occasions. And the Catcher in the Rye is interesting because Mark Chapman had it, the assassin of John Lennon, and other assassins have been found to have Catcher in the Rye. And we do know that it was used to trigger responses like a Manchurian Candidate in other people. So,
and that was going to be my next question, is for Bill to talk about some of the experiences he had in the military where he was subjected to an MK Ultra type of program and brainwashing.
I was just going to come to that now with this story, because it happened straight after this story. After what I'm telling you now about the 2 abductions, it happened straight after. It was straight after that. Can you pick me up, Joanne? Where am I? I've lost it.
Yeah, I tell you what, Bill. Just as a rider to that, why don't you tell them about the event that happened with you and John? That you experienced simultaneously, because then the next day you actually went off to the MK Ultra event.
Yeah. Sorry.
You okay with that?
Yeah. As I John and I, when the practice camp ended, John came back to the room. I hadn't met John before. Sorry, Bill. This is a different John that he had the abduction experiences with, by the way, folks. Just to make that clear. Sorry, Bill. Sorry about that. That's my fault. Sorry. I'm not very good at this. I'm just not. I met John in the room. There were 4 of us in the room. He told me he was in the room. Actually, I'd forgotten. I met him again. Well, I've spoke to him again after 45 years, and he confirmed what I was talking about on another program. In fact, he's on a program himself tonight. In fact, I met John, and we of course went out for a drink on the night, as we always soldiers do. And we got back to the room on the night. Sorry, it must have been midnight, 1 maybe. Got into bed, and as the lights were out, I saw in front of my bed, actually I saw it in front of John's at first, he was the other side of the room. I saw this big dark figure, very big, looked like it had a hood on and a robe. It just looked like a big massive figure in front of my bed. And I looked across at John's, when I looked across at John's bed, he'd had the figure there before me. I looked at his, then it was in front of mine. And I didn't say anything. John told me, he said, did you see that thing last night? And I didn't say anything to anybody. I thought I'd gone a bit mad, you know. But that was the experience with John in the room. And then at the same time, we were asked to go on. They wanted volunteers for the flu injection, testing the flu injection, they said. I said yes, because there was a week's leave involved, or 2 weeks leave involved. I said yes. John said no. I went, and it wasn't what we thought it was. And all I remember is I went to the dentist. This comes into a story later on where my tooth, I lost a tooth because the tooth was drilled, but I don't know why. And I had a filling put in I didn't need, and I don't know why. But that comes later on, 20, 25, 30 years later, when I go to the dentist. This comes in. But anyway, sorry, Joanne, can you help? I'm losing my story. Go ahead.
Yes, so you guys had this sort of paranormal event with John, and it's just great that John Sutton will come on and tell, corroborate this story and tell the story of something of the regiment. So we do have somebody who was with Bill in the same regiment at the same time in the same year. So that's amazing. But the very next day, Bill went off to this, he signed up for this MK Ultra event. Of course, that's not what it was called. And he said no sooner had he gone to, do all the signing up and whatever, that he's suddenly somewhere else. So, Bill, you pick that up.
Well, when I don't know how I got from Germany to England. I don't remember anything. If it was England, it must have been. All I remember is I was in the back of it's now 4-tonners, but I think at that time it would have been a 3-tonner. We were sitting on the benches. We got 2 benches each side, and we all sat on them. I don't know the guys. I didn't know any of the guys that were on it. As far as I know, I didn't know any of them. As we were coming towards the camp, I saw a board of the camp, and there was a tree growing upwards in between, and all I could see was the top of it said west, and the bottom it said down, and so I take it as West Down Camp. I take it as sorry, I've got it wrong. That West Down Camp's another camp. Anyway, I saw the sign, which I didn't understand because there was a tree going in between it. We went in. I remember being by one hut, and I remember we were giving sugar lumps of sugar to eat, and also injections. I think we'd already been given the injections before we had the sugar lumps, or it could be the other way around. I'm not 100%. But all I remember is I was sitting on the ground, and I looked down at my legs, and I felt like instead of having 2 legs, I had one big one. It looked like I had one great big swelled leg instead of 2 legs. That's all I remember. This must have been some kind of LSD or something.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. They gave you LSD and the sugar.
It's the only thing I can say is that I don't know much about the drugs, but from what I gather, it must have been LSD or something like that, you know. And I could hear birds whistling, twittering. You know, they sound really beautiful, the birds. You know, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. Everything sounded lovely, you know, all around me. And I saw guys trying to walk, trying to sort of focus, look at the sky, trying to focus on the buildings. They couldn't seem to walk properly. Guys were trying to climb trees and all sorts. And I was sitting there looking at my legs, thinking, "Where's my other leg gone?" You know, and that's all I remember of that. And I remember being in a room where there was like a kaleidoscope thing in front of me going round and round, and I felt like I was going into it. And that's really all I remember of that, really. There was a couple of other little things I remember. I mean,
well, it was like, sorry, Bill, it was like, you also said it was like a huge spiral going round, and you had the sensation of it almost drawing you in, but there were 2 people either side of you, either shouting or talking to you simultaneously.
I was just coming to that, yeah.
Sorry.
I got, at the same time as this spiral thing was going round and round, and I felt like I was going to be drifting into it. Like, it's hard to explain. I can't explain it, actually. I felt like my body was still in the chair, but I was going into it, but my body was still in the chair. I'd forgot about that. This is just coming back now, in fact. Little items do come back occasionally. But I got 2 guys, one side and one the other of me, slightly behind me, reading from books into both ears. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Absolutely. I can't even read properly, you know. And I got 2 guys reading books into my ears, you know.
Wow.
Really, that's the next thing I know. Now you got to remember, I don't know how long this happened for. I've got no idea whatsoever. To me, it could have been seconds, minutes, days, weeks. I haven't got the foggiest idea how long all this went on for. I came on leave. Now, when I left, I found this out later that I've got a problem. After my MK Ultra, every time I looked at anybody's face and looked in their eyes, I wanted to rip their head off. I just, anger inside me used to boil inside me when I looked into someone's eyes, anyone's eyes, didn't matter who it was. The only person I could look into the eyes of was my mother, the only person. Everybody else I wanted to kill when I looked in their eyes. Really weird sensation, feeling. I have to really hold back all the time. Sorry, Joanne, can you help? I've lost me.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you suddenly found yourself on leave in this kind of
that's right. Sorry.
State, But and you were having a family. You'd been deposited with your family,
Yeah,
and you were
Brian,
having a family get together. And tell them about the two guys at the bar.
well, it was Brian who was killed by the Masons who was there. Now, I'm wondering if that's connected to other stories further on. I'm just bringing some connections here now while I'm on the radio. You know, this is ridiculous. I'm starting to remember while I'm on the radio.
So the two guys at the bar. The two guys at the bar.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. When I got back home, Brian was there, the guy that was killed. I've just told you about. And they said, let's go for a drink at an aunt's pub. Now, we went to my aunt's pub, and in a place called Dudley, we all went in, and I had a couple of pints. I didn't have that many. But there was two American guys in there, and, you know, with the American accent, you know, with American trilbies on, you know. And they was a bit away from the bar. I can't remember whether they spoke to me or not. I'm not sure. But I'll be, as I was drinking, began to feel quite strange. Not drink strange, other strange. And I began to get angry. And my uncle was behind the bar, who I'd actually never met before. In fact, he was an uncle I hadn't met before. I don't know what he said to me, but I dragged him over to the bar and thumped him. So my parents and the family got me out of the pub, put me in a car. Then my cousin Brian got him behind me in the car and dropped a cigarette ash down the back of my neck. And I punched him. Next thing I know, I'm out of the car. I'm on the deck out of the car, and I'm walking along trying to stagger away, and my head's really spinning, and I don't know what's going on.
I mean, it's as if your drink was spiked. I mean, because it's not normal after a couple of pints to be in that sort of situation.
I can't say it was, but I didn't, well, I wouldn't have seen it happen anyway. But no. I can't say it was, but that's the only thing I can think of that would make me act in this way. Of course, I'm arrested. I start trying to fight a copper, and I'm arrested. He told me after the next day, because I was a soldier, they let me off, you know. They said, okay. And they actually, my aunt's pub, my aunt was actually the mayor of Dudley at the time. And all the coppers used to drink there. All the police drank in there. So they let me go. And they found out who I was and that I'd cracked up after too much drink, they thought, you know. Because I'd come from Northern Ireland and this sort of thing, you know, we'd been in action and that sort of thing. Maybe they thought I'd gone a bit loopy. And they let me go the next day, you know. They let me go early morning. My cousin came in, they said, go on. And by the way, I have got a mother and father, by the way. You know, so I don't know what I call him. That was the sergeant, that was. The one that arrested me.
No,
it took 3 of them to arrest me, I can tell you.
He gave him a fight, that's good. Yeah, Bill and Joanna, you had mentioned there was the other incident that you wanted him to specifically talk about in that one location.
Well, we were, I don't know whether it was relating to the army incident, but what I would like to say is that what Bill couldn't grasp there, couldn't bring to memory, was that we think that it was Porton Down. Porton Down was infamous for its non-consensual testing on soldiers and others, and for which they have been taken to court, by the way, in years past. And this time, 1968, absolutely fits the bill.
Yeah.
For that.
Porton Down actually does belong to the British.
Yeah.
But it's rented out to the Americans.
Mm-hmm. And with the Americans had their own program going in the 60s and 70s with the MK Ultra program in the Montauk, Long Island area.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Yeah. So for some reason they were I don't know why they picked on Bill and what they did, but for Bill, I'll just make this comment because Bill's mentioned it many times, that over the years, and we're talking about many years, Bill had to fight off in any argument situation or anything, you know, not going to do serious damage to somebody, like kill them, because of this programming. So it is all credit to Bill's incredible will that nobody has died because of what was done to him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
very good willpower.
Yeah, superb willpower, which is why he's still alive. even though he died a couple of years ago in 2014. And when I'd started my show, the Amash Files, I introduced him as my recently deceased guest.
He keeps dying and he keeps coming back. I mean, come on. Bill, one thing I'm really interested in is these experiences you've had with the number of different alien species. I mean, it seems you've dealt with the Nordics, the reptilians, the Greys. Is there any one of those types of species that you've dealt with more than any others?
I believe the Greys. I believe. My experience is I haven't seen what's been taking me most of the time. I haven't seen them. They've taken me without... All I see is the flashing lights and I've gone and I'm back. And that's mainly my experiences, except for the ones that I actually remember. And the Abingdon experience is the one that came back after the download. But that was an abduction. I was abducted that night. I was taken that night.
Now, here's a question for you, Bill. Before you've had...
Can I ask it?
Go ahead. You do it.
Right, Bill. Just recently, I was talking to Mark, and we've done a survey on Facebook to find out if anybody ever experienced certain things that I experienced. One of them is a high-pitched sound when I'm in bed at night, or sometimes even when I'm sitting doing something, maybe washing up, I can hear a high-pitched sound. Shortly after that, I don't remember anything. It's as if I'm asleep. I'm out of it. Another one is a flash of light.
That's the one that I know. I haven't heard the sound you're talking about. As far as I can remember, I've not heard a sound, but the flashing lights, I always get flashing lights before I'm taken. I live now next door to an ambulance station with flashing lights going constantly day and night.
But so there's a difference.
I wouldn't know if I was being taken or not. No, I wouldn't know. When you're looking through the curtains, when you look through the curtains and you see blue, red and blue, green flashing lights, and you've got an ambulance station next door to you with the police there and the ambulance is there all the time, I wouldn't take it. I could be taken now. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know I'd been taken and put back now.
No, with me, it's a bright light. And even if I got my eyes shut, it seems to go through my eyelids. I know that it's just flashed.
Hey, Bill, I tell you what we haven't spoken about, which we have alluded to, which is just the most jaw-dropping element of your military story, is the phone call you made some 40-odd years later, or after your army experience, to John, the guy you were abducted with, not the one you shared the barracks with, and what was said. So you were trying to find him, but you got hold of his brother. Why don't you just tell that? It's really short.
Yeah, tell us that one, John.
Astonishing.
I should have said about this. When I got hold of John's brother, I said, nice to speak to you again. He said, I don't remember you. I said, well, we spoke once. He said, hello once. That's all, And he said, well, who are you then? I told him who I was and that I was a friend of his brother's for a couple of weeks because I only knew John for a fortnight when I joined the regiment. This was during the abductions. I only knew him during the abductions. That's something I hadn't realised until I wrote the book. We wrote the book. Sorry, I've lost it, Joanne.
Just that you found this number and you got hold of John's brother, whom you had seen once, and you'd actually seen the brothers fighting once in the regiment. So, you knew it was real. He knew it was real.
But anyway, I said to him, I'm trying to get hold of John. And he said, he won't speak to you. And I said, well, why not? I haven't spoken to him for 45 years, I haven't seen him for 45 years. Why wouldn't he speak to me? He said he won't speak to anyone. He's locked himself in his house for 30 years, saying he's being abducted all his life, and now they keep coming to get him. And he gets his food delivered. He won't answer the telephone. He won't speak to anyone. And that was when I told you about, after I'd spoke to his brother said, well, when did this happen? And I said 1968. And he said, it couldn't have been. We weren't in the army then. We were in the army in the early 50s. They weren't even in the army when this happened. This time change thing that I've been going through has really baffled my brain.
And I tell you another point, Bill and everybody, that is absolutely mind-boggling as well. The other John, whom we've spoken to, who Bill had this paranormal experience with, if you want to call it that, also doesn't even remember seeing this John that we're talking about. Now, in a regiment, that's impossible not to know your comrades or colleagues.
Sorry, Joanne, I've realised something.
Oh, go on then.
The regiment was away on practice camp. When they came back, John wasn't there. When the rest of the regiment came back, so those 15 guys I was with that night on that abduction, the 15 guys where the orange mist and all that, were they in the army at the same time as me? Except for, were any of them in the army at the same time as me? Was I put into it? I haven't thought about that, Joanne. I hadn't even...
What a thought!
I've only just thought about that.
So just to understand, you're saying that those 15 guys you came back with that may not have been in the army?
Maybe not. Maybe not at the same time as me, because they were all wearing different types of dress as well. They were wearing old BDs and all sorts.
BDs being battle dress.
Yes.
English.
I've just realised that soldiers from different times were put together
back with you
in that time. I've just realised that.
Holy crap!
I wrote the book in it by remembering things as I was writing.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it.
Oh my God.
You know,
my God, this is another first.
Right here on Paranormal UK Radio.
You had to say that one, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, you know, Joanna, Bill, let me. One of the things that we've been learning in our research in dealing with this type of phenomenon is just how strange it really is, because most UFO researchers or ET researchers tend to look at nuts and bolts. They're more interested in the craft than they are the actual experiences of people like you. And one of the things that we have been really leaning towards is how most of this phenomena is operating on a multi-dimensional level beyond our three-dimensional physical plane that include different periods of time, different periods of space, different realities, all merging together in a way that is just beyond our current comprehension. And this just sounds like it fits right into it, that when these beings get involved, it's our version of reality gets twisted, and things happen like, you know, you not possibly being able to make those deliveries, and yet people see you making the deliveries. Was it a doppelganger? Was it really you, but a slightly different reality of you? I mean, there's so many different things we can look at this that, you know, after you've looked at it for quite a while, we got to run down to the pub and have several pints to, because that's the only way we're going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think the whole story actually is absolutely amazing.
When you talk about time changes, Mark, when you get through to 3/4 through the book, you'll see when I was delivering, and you'll see that I was taken at a place called Redditch, a place called Moon's Moat, in fact, which is a bit of a strange name.
Well, that's another one.
Yeah, as I was being taken, I was driving down a road that was changing to a smaller road all the time, and the vehicles were getting older and older, right back to past the 50s. And I was watching vehicles coming past me on the other side of the road. There was none on my side coming past me that were outdated. You know, I mean, really outdated, not just old vehicles. I mean,
one of them was a 1940s Ford Woody, it was called, because it had a wood as part of its structure.
Yes, I'm familiar with those.
They even stopped and looked at you, didn't they, Bill?
Yeah, that was before I got onto the main road. Sorry, I should have told you about that. As I was coming down towards an island to get onto the main road, to my left, I thought it was a bouncy castle, children's bouncy castle. It looked like a steam iron. I've seen the pictures of it on YouTube now. And that's, as I was coming onto that, down to the island, came from nowhere because there was no road. There was no road to my right. I know that now, but I didn't know at the time. It came and it sat on the island in front of me, staring at me. And there was an old guy with a rugged face, a woman I couldn't really see very well looking at me, and an old woman in the back pointing at me. And then I went on, and that was an old Woody, the old Woody wagon from about 1940.
Well, they must have been just amazed to see your modern vehicle in their time.
Yeah, I think at that time they were just taking me through dimensions at that time. I've worked a lot. I've seen a lot of dimensions. I've seen this. I strongly believe that we live in different dimensions.
Yeah, so do we. I've seen Mark in many.
Did you see the one where I'm actually handsome and rich? Because that one keeps eluding me in this dimension.
Yeah.
But I think dimensions are the main problem that we've got to solve. That's the problem we need to solve, is the dimensional problem, I think, personally.
The one thing with solving that problem, unfortunately, is we have to get beyond our Western culture conditioning. We are conditioned to look at our world as only three-dimensional physical space, and we look at time as linear. And there is so much evidence coming out now through different theories that all time is happening at once. And it's only our perception of it that's linear. And if that's the case, then it's possible to bleed over into these other time periods or these other realities in space and time and experience them. And
it makes you wonder about reincarnation in that regard, doesn't it?
Well, one theory in that regard we've discussed plenty of times is, reincarnation. The current theory is it's linear. Okay, you live a lifetime, you die, then you go on the other side, plan your next life, come back and live again. What if all of these different incarnations we're living in are all happening at once? All happening at the same time.
I believe that, actually.
Yes.
I believe that.
And not just different lives, but various different variations of the current life.
I believe that as well. Yeah. I believe you've got the same beliefs as me.
Yeah. Irene has mentioned that just a few minutes ago, that she has had visions and seeing me, because we do talking in our businesses and everything. We talk all the time. And she has seen me in different different realities where I'm slightly different. I don't smoke, and in one she sees me smoking as a different example.
Not visions, some time jumping.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just you're jumping through realities. So it's and I really believe that this is the true reality that we're in. And we've had it conditioned out of us. By society, by whatever forces that don't want us to acknowledge this, which leads us to believe not only with these extraterrestrial beings, which I don't really believe many of them are extraterrestrial. I think that they're coming from different realities, not just from different star systems. And we're dealing with other beings and creatures right here on this very planet that have been here with us all along, but come in and out of our reality. So, reality itself is far more wonderful and mind-bending than most people are aware of.
Is there a reality?
There might not be a reality. It might be millions of different permutations out there that we could be experiencing, and there's not one that is, quote, reality. That in itself is the reality that we have to deal with. Now, let me ask you a question, Bill, and this is something that I've heard from a couple of other experiencers. Have you experienced meeting people who have died, and they appear alive, or people who have died have appeared with these beings?
Only one that I can think could have been. I saw my mother at the time she died. I was 100 miles away. She stood in front of me at the time she died. But the only other one is a young girl that I knocked about with when I was a child. And we were very good friends. And I was down one of the places where I was abducted, where I saw, you haven't got into the book yet, you won't see this part. I saw some shadow beings. I saw shadow beings. And she came running from that direction. And she came running up to me and she said, And she said, hello. And I said, hello. And she said, you don't know who I am, do you? And I said, no. And she ran off. And I think it was the girl that I'd grown up with.
But tell them how she looked, Bill.
So, oh yeah, she had a scar from the top of her face to the bottom, from one side down, right the way down across her face. Now, I didn't see her after her death, but she came off a motorbike before the laws about helmets and things like that, and hit a lamppost, and he cracked her face open.
Oh.
And that's what killed her. You know, that's what killed her. It's in the book.
And
You'll
also,
see this in the book.
these two people, Bill and this girl, Lynn, were kind of, you know, from a young age, people thought they were bound to end up together as adults, as a, you know, marriage or something. But anyway, circumstances didn't allow that, and one thing led to another, and you know, they split early in their years. So it's just very interesting that she suddenly made an appearance as this being, and we think it's her, but we don't know. It's speculation again, but we could, you know, best guess.
What about the thought? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, you see that it was almost like they were meant to get together, but they didn't. Well, they didn't in this reality. Maybe in one of the others they did.
I've had a thought about this myself, about this. Now, my life seemed to have been manipulated to going into the army. It seemed manipulated that way. Would I have gone in if she'd still be alive?
No, probably not.
Well, think about maybe forces came into power, into whatever, maybe.
Well, here's another thought for you to consider, and I'm basing this off of the works of Dr. John Mack, and with his hypnotherapy. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Mack's work.
Absolutely.
Okay, and even Dolores Cannon's work as well. Both of them working with hypnotic regression on many experiencers. And there's a theme that seems to come up, and I want to get your opinion on this, Bill. You know, most people, when they go through the abduction experience, you get a lot of people who are angry, say, how can they do this to me? I never gave my permission for this. They're using us, treating us like cattle, blah, blah, blah. And yet, a lot of times when these people undergo hypnotic regression, it's found that they did agree to it before they came into this lifetime. That many of them are either part of these beings on another dimensional plane, or even their spirits had made, and this of course comes into the reincarnation aspect, that they made the pact to come in and be part of this lifetime. They made that agreement beforehand. Of course, you come in and your memory is wiped, like we all come in. So you think, oh, you're being abused, you didn't agree to this, and yet maybe you actually did. What is your thought on that, Bill?
I'm not 100% sure what I believe on that. You could be right on that. You could be. I don't remember, as you can imagine, I don't remember being a child and agreeing to it. I don't remember anything like that. But I have thought that maybe people like me, and I'm not trying to be better than anyone else or anything like that. I actually feel terrible about what's happened to me. I hate the thought that this has happened to me. I didn't want it to happen. I didn't want to be one of these crazy people who said they'd been abducted, you know. But it seems to me that maybe we are manipulated from the time we're young, or maybe they pick us. When I was 3, maybe they saw me and thought, he'll do. Maybe they thought that, he'll do. He looks as though he'll do for what we want to experiment. But I will say one thing about this. I feel, and this is how I feel, I mean, it sounds a bit crazy to most people. I feel as though when I was young, something entered me and lived with me all till I was 44. When I was 44, it left me, or they left, or whatever. But they had to give me my memory back so that I could carry on being a human being. Because without any memory at all, I'd have gone back to a 3-year-old child. That's how I feel.
I just wonder, and that's really interesting too, but I just wonder if we've got time for you to quickly run through the event, the download, the 44 event.
Can I just ask one quick question before you start?
Yeah.
Did you ever have any psychic experiences when you were a child? Psychic in any way? Strong intuition?
Not
that you can remember. Or
well, what I will say, and Bill probably won't go for this, but there was a period of time when he would know that he would see a UFO, or he had a lady friend at the time, and she'd never seen a UFO. She was a medium but didn't believe in it, and he said he'd show her, and sure enough, he said, "Right, get your coat on," and there's this massive event going on.
So you had like
premonition.
knew when it was going to happen before it happened.
I knew 9/11 was going to take place the day before.
So you have got psychic abilities.
I have, yeah. I didn't. Now here's a strange one. Maybe you might find this strange. I don't think I've got psychic abilities, but sometimes something comes to me. It's not. If I had a psychic ability, I could do it all the time.
I don't mean like mediums doing readings or contacting spirits or anything like that.
I haven't. I don't believe I've got a psychic ability, but sometimes things come to me from somewhere. I believe they're being given to me because I haven't got any abilities at all. I've got no abilities. I think these things are given to me from somewhere. 9/11 was amazing because we went on holiday the day, and when we got to the caravan, everyone was watching it, and the caravan was dirty, and I said, "The caravan is filthy. You don't expect it to go into that, do you? Haven't you seen the news?" I said, "Well, no. I'm more interested in getting into my caravan." I'd forgotten that the day before I'd had a premonition about 9/11, but I didn't know where it was going to be. All I said to my wife was, "Book a holiday today because tomorrow America will be attacked, and it's the end of the world." And she said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "We'll do it." And I believed that I'd been working hard all during the summer. You know, I was on summer season, and I was getting fed up with it. I was really fed up with going on stage, and I thought I need a break. And I thought my mind had made that up to have a break from playing, singing and playing. I just thought my mind needs a break, and it's made that up.
Yeah, well, for many people, it was the end of the world. But what was the question you wanted him to answer, Joanne?
Oh, sorry, I don't think we have time. No, I was just going to ask Bill to just whiz us through the download event. But
no, we have about 12 more minutes in the program, so yeah, he can go ahead and go into that.
Where do you want me to go from, Joanne?
Why? Well, why don't you? Why don't you just talk about going over the Berwyn Mountain? And I'll just say this bit, that the Berwyn Mountain at this time was famous or infamous for a 1974 alleged UFO crash. But at this time, folks, Bill doesn't know anything about this, but he is going to and from around the Berwyn Mountain on his way home, which was toward Oswestry. I won't say the place it is. And it was very, very dark in the deep dark night of 2 a.m.s, and Bill's driving back home, having done a gig. He's got a 6-month or 8-month-old son at home with the mum, and he's just going back there to do what he does every night: chill out after a show, chill out, have a drink, have a smoke, and just analyze the show. That's what thought he was going to be doing. But on the way over the Berwyn Mountain, Bill, you pick up the story about what you saw, what was being reflected on the bonnet of your car.
Well, I was playing in a place called the Port Maddock, and this is down North Wales, bottom of North Wales, top of North Wales, I should say. And I'm coming over a stretch of mountains to get back home. I drove over these beautiful stretch of mountains called the Berwyn Mountains. Now, I am not, at this time in my life, knowing anything about abductees, about aliens, I don't believe in them, I don't believe in anything at all. As I'm coming across this stretch of mountains, over one mountain comes what I can only describe looking like an orange fried egg and flopping about. It just seemed not to be solid. And it comes over my car, and I've got an old Volvo with a long front on it, black. and on the bonnet comes an orange spinning like a fried egg on the bonnet of the car. And the next thing I know, and I only found this out when me and Joanne researched this area, I'd lost 26 miles of road. I didn't even know. When I got home, I lived in a bungalow in a small street, away from everyone, near enough. There's only a few houses there. Over in the air in front of my bungalow, in the street, was this 30-foot high. What did I call it?
300 foot high, you said.
300 foot high. What did it look? What did I say it looked like?
A cone shape, like an ice cream cone.
Yeah, like an ice cream cone, with sparkly lights all over it, going round and round the thing. And I thought it was a projection from a fair or something. And I stood watching it for about 15 minutes. And I thought, that's enough of watching that. And so I got my guitar, which I treasure, and I put that under my son's cot, who I treasured. He was only 4 months old or something. I put that under his cot and went into the living room, put the TV on, sat down, poured a brandy, got a cigarette out. I didn't roll them at that time. I smoked real ones. Got a cigarette out, and I just sat looking at the wall. You know, sort of relaxing after the gig and reminiscing on the gig and thinking about life. And the wall seemed to move a little bit. And I looked at the TV, and on the TV I saw 3 alien faces that I saw at Abingdon in the front, on the screen of the TV, like on the screen of the vehicle. And as I looked at it, I looked at that, looked back at the wall, and the wall had started to, it looked as though it was changing shape, like shapes were coming on the wall. And I looked back at the TV, and then I saw someone lying on the TV. I saw someone lying on a. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Yes, keep going.
Yeah, I saw on the TV. I saw someone getting around someone lying on a flat surface, and then that's when the memories started to flood back. The whole of that Abingdon experience I told you about, well, Joanne told you about that, came back. That came back first. It just downloaded like, it must have been, I don't know, it must have been second, but it felt like I was reliving the whole thing in seconds. I was actually reliving it in time, but in seconds, but in time. That sounds.
And also, Bill, do you remember that you said that the wall that was undulating seemed to look like it was producing some strange kind of hieroglyphs?
No, I don't know anything about hieroglyphics. I've seen a little bit, but I know nothing about them. But that's the only way I can describe what the wall was changing shape to. But I'm not sure they were hieroglyphics or not, you know. I'm not that intelligent person when it comes to all that stuff. I didn't go to school, you see, you know. But, yeah, and then the download came, and after the whole of Abingdon experience came back, the whole of it. What had just happened that night was completely erased from my memory for about 10 years until I remembered everything else. Then that part started to come back. The part where I was abducted and remembered everything started to come back 10 years after all the memories started to come back. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that strange? Sorry,
and that's brought you to where you are now with the book.
Yeah, over the last 20 years, my brain, I kept, for the first 7-8 years,
yeah,
I would not believe myself. I would not believe it. I thought, I'm having a mental breakdown. This will pass. This will go away. This will go away in time. I've had a mental breakdown. I'm believing stupidity. This will go away. And it didn't go away. And when I got hold of John's brother and a couple of other people, most of the people who could confirm this are dead. They're dead, you know, they're gone.
Yeah.
When I got hold of John's brother and he told me what he told me, and then I just knew then that this was real. This was not my imagination. This was not something that had been put into my mind. The first thing I thought was this had been put into my mind by MK Ultra. But when I look back on it, it couldn't have been, you know, with all the proof I've got. And then if I hadn't been ever abducted again after I was 44, if I'd never have been taken again, I would have believed it was brainwashing or something. I wouldn't have believed it. But because I was carried on being taken after 44, I knew then I was being taken. I didn't before, but once I knew, then I knew.
Yeah.
And when
are you still being taken, Bill?
Not now. I haven't been taken I saw them 6 years ago.
When was the last?
After I finished writing the book, a friend of mine paid for the book to be published.
Yeah.
After I finished the book, I was driving to a house. She lives out in the middle of nowhere in the sticks. She's a lady friend of mine. And she lives out in the sticks. And as we were going towards her house, we'd just come from my mum's who lives out in the sticks in the same place. And as we was going towards her house, they were there in front of me. They were there for about 30 seconds. She saw them, but she couldn't see properly. She got a dog jumping about on her lap. And I got out of the car, looked at them, and they shot off. And last time I've seen them. I haven't seen them since. I've seen one or two UFOs in the sky, because I do look a lot. But I haven't had any contact, any sightings, nothing from them. Well, I think
since then. You have actually, I'm sorry, I beg to differ, you have at various times, you may have forgotten, not necessarily this last year, but certainly up until last year, had moments when you said, oh my God, you'll never guess what I've been seeing in the sky. And I've seen them for, 2 or 3 nights running. And then it's like a period and then it goes. And then, you'll see them again and so on. You have had, since we've been doing the book, fairly regular, sightings, not necessarily being taken, but definitely sightings. Not this last year, but you have been extremely poorly for quite a while. And, quite a lot of that we think is to do with this dimension hopping, the radiation, and so on, the mind control element. Well, we've come to the end of the show now, but Bill, we'd love to have you back.
I'd love to be back.
Both of you really would love to continue this story, because I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more that's got to be told.
We've just scratched the surface.
That's right.
That's
definitely right.
It's a nice show. You're pleasant people. You've got a nice show. It's lovely.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Well, Joanne, can you say where the book can be got?
Yeah, it's out on Amazon and Kindle, and that really is, you just check out 44, based on an ex-soldier's true story, and it should come up. It comes up pretty fast these days. And it really is an incredible read. And I still find it incredible to talk about these things. Every day it's like a new thing. And it may sound an odd thing to say, but there is always something coming up.
Yeah.
And Bill and I speak quite regularly, and he says, oh my God, that's another memory.
Well, that's it. It happened here on this show tonight as well. Yeah. Okay, then. So we have to say goodbye to you. We have to say goodbye to our listeners. And Mark, do you want to take us out?
Well, again, Bill and Joanne, thank you very much for coming on. This was a great interview. And we want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. And tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean and Eastern Time here on the PA UK, Paranormal UK Radio Network. And we will catch you all next time. Have a great evening.
But actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.